There are moments when life as you know it completely falls apart. Divorce, loss, failure, heartbreak, financial collapse. It's 2 a.m., you can't sleep, and everything feels like it's over. But here's the truth. This is not the end. I'm Christy Slackus, and this is a show where we talk about the strategies that turn heartbreak, loss, and failure into success, and share the real stories of people who've done it. Because no matter how dark it feels right now, your story isn't over. Hello, and welcome to another episode of This Is Not the End. I have with us today Sam Lara. Sam, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, Sam, thank you for joining. For those of you who don't know, Sam is actually the case manager at Z Family Law, my law firm. So she oversees all the cases, and she got to us in a very interesting way. But Sam, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself and the life you live now?
Hi, my name is Sam. Like Christy said, I'm the case manager at Z Family Law. I'm born and raised in Northern California, so I'm from the North Bay, right outside Napa. I grew up right next to Napa. And yeah, I came to ZFL coming up on 4 years ago. Um, my partner was, transferred job positions and we moved across the country. So, and then I got hired at CFL literally probably a week later. So yeah, and I've been here ever since.
Well, and Sam does such a fantastic job, just so you know, because case manager can mean different things at different law firms. In our firm, that's a leadership position. So Sam, as a non-attorney, actually is on our leadership team, and I could not be more thrilled to have her. She is just so wonderful at our job and so wonderful at helping all of our clients find new beginnings. And the story that she came here to share today, um, I think, Sam, would it be fair to say is part of why you're so passionate about helping families find their new chances?
Yes, I always use humor to cope with things. So I always say my Lifetime movie really helps me out with making sure we help our clients.
Well, Sam not only is killing it at work, she's also recently engaged. She has a soon-to-be amazing stepson, and life seems to be going really well.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I definitely was dreaming about the life that I have now.
Well, why don't you take us back to, since this show is all about finding that hope in the hard times, why don't you tell us what happened in your life that brought you to that hard time? And then we can talk about how you turned that moment into, instead of the end, the pivot.
Okay. Well, my Lifetime movie started right before COVID. Everybody's lives kind of changed. Fortunately, I was going through a pandemic and my family falling apart. So that was something that was really hard to deal with. But essentially, I want to say growing up, mother had really odd tendencies. She would get obsessed with, purchasing makeup, for example, and she would buy it even though she couldn't afford it. And then she would return it. And same things, then she would be obsessed with purses and she would be obsessed with shoes.
And
So
was
just
this
things,
even when you were little?
yeah. Even when I
Okay.
was little, like I can remember going to the mall and being there for a really long time. Um,
And how many
and
people are in your family?
So for us, we are a family of four. So it's my dad, my mom, my brother. And then culturally, my grandmother moved in with us when my grandfather passed away. And then one of my dad's brothers moved in to help take care of her. Altogether, for the past 25 years, it's pretty much been a family of six.
Got it.
Um, and so, fast forward 2018, my mom was telling me my parents are struggling. I had just started going to school to become a paralegal, and she would kind of just ask me for money, ask to buy groceries, things like that. And I had no problem helping my parents out, right? It started turning into her taking my debit card out of my purse and well, a bill not being paid and a car being repossessed and just things kept on snowballing and it all hit like a climax in January 2020. Within a span of a week, we found out that rent wasn't being paid because my mother managed all the finances. So rent wasn't being paid. And essentially we had gotten a 60-day notice to vacate our house during Thanksgiving of 2019. We had no idea. She had taken loans out and purchased really expensive items in family members' names using their social security numbers. Um, She ended up having a gambling addiction, having a boyfriend, you name it, everything you could think of under the sun within about a span of a week, we found out. So essentially, we were living every day wondering if the sheriffs were going to come kick us out of our house. All of my parents' cars got repossessed because she had been lying about paying them. Um, she had been borrowing money from family members going back 20 years that we had no idea about. And essentially, our life crumbled. We had nothing. And we just rented a storage unit and put everything in it that we could and just kind of tried to figure out our next steps. There was a pending eviction case. Um, and it was just really hard. It felt like the world had fallen apart. This entire life that we had built for ourselves and this family that we had was gone overnight. My mother disappeared and left us to clean up her mess.
How old were you?
I was, this is coming on 6 years. So I was 24. I had
And
just turned 24.
what were you doing for work at the time?
So at the time, I had just started a position as a file clerk at a law firm that was really well known back home. So, um, I am in this new position in this world that I want to be in. I'm going to school to be a paralegal. And in the meantime, while I have this job that, is amazing and I'm doing all these things, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get into my house at night. And I have a bag of things with me to make sure, like, in case they lock us out. Um,
What was in the
I
bag?
So all of us had our own like backpacks of just stuff that we needed. So like clothes and like our chargers and like our immediate stuff, wallet, things like that, that if something were to happen and we weren't be able to go home, like we at least have this backpack full of things.
What about, like, sentimental items? Were you carrying any of that around, or were you worried about that kinda stuff?
Not really. At the time, I was just more so worried about just everything in general. I really wasn't even thinking about like sentimental items or anything material wise. It was just, I need my phone because I have to go to work. I need my wallet. I need my keys. Like, I need these things. I at least need a couple of outfits for work. Because it was really hard. And my dad was really proud of me and where I was heading. And he had me go live with my mom's cousin. And they took me in, and everybody agreed, like, she has this really good job. She can't mess this up. Um, so I was, living with them for, I moved in with them in February of 2020. And then I believe in May, we were able to finally get our footing and get a place to stay. So,
During that time, how did it make you feel about yourself?
um, I, it's kind of like a hard feeling. My mom was my best friend. She knew everything about me. There were no secrets. I talked to her about everything. And I just felt really like low and I just felt really stupid because when I think back about all the excuses, she was funneling money from people through me and I had no idea. Um, I was wondering why random family members were Venmoing me and she would say, "Oh, they need me to go pay something for them." And it's my mom. Why am I not going to believe her? And I just felt really dumb, if that makes sense.
It does. So how did you get through it, being in a totally different spot? And I assume you were worried about your brother and your grandmother and your father and uncle.
Um, I am one of those people that I kind of just put my head down and get tunnel vision. I go into survival mode. So at the time, I just knew that I can't give up. I can't see, like all of us, even my dad, we all just were like, okay, we have to pick up and we have to move on. Like, we can't just sit here and feel sorry for ourselves. Like, we need to find a place to live. When she left, she cleared out my parents' bank account. We had no money at all. Everything was gone and she disappeared on us. And we kind of just were like, okay, we need to do this. We need to do that. And we were just in survival mode, trying to figure out what the next step was.
Did you try to reach out to her?
So she would reach out to me off and on. I personally did not. There were moments later on when we finally did get settled and find a new place. She did come visit a couple times. It felt uncomfortable. It felt awkward. I felt like I didn't know, and I still to this day don't know who she is really. Um, and yeah, it was just the few times I had seen her, she acted like nothing happened. Like everything was back to normal, like we were best friends riding around, going to get food. And it was really weird. Me and my brother were really uncomfortable, and more things were happening, and we were finding out about more things. We stopped all communication with her. I haven't talked to her going on 6 years. It'll be 6 years probably this summer.
When do you What point do you consider to be the pivot? So I understand this was absolutely devastating due to your mother's actions. You were literally homeless for a period of time. Like you had no home. You had to figure that out and stay with your aunt. Your family was losing their home. They had no money. When was the pivot and what was their moment? I remember you talking with me something about a television specifically where you guys knew you were on the other side of it.
Yeah. So the pivot point was my dad's best friend. He calls him his brother, but they're childhood best friends. He had, separated from his wife, and he was living in this home by himself, and it was like a four-bedroom house, and he had found out about what happened. And he had a really rough upbringing, and he actually lived with my grandparents for a while. They took him in. And my grandfather meant a lot to him. So he literally moved out of his home and was let us live there. And he said, I was sitting there and I couldn't think about what, like, he couldn't imagine us like being out on the street. Like, what would my grandfather say? My grandfather changed his life, and he couldn't just let, my grandma especially just have nowhere. And so he literally moved out of his home. They did a rental agreement together, but he moved out of his home for us and we moved into his house. And that was like the pivot of it. I think later on, this actually happened over the holidays. I went back home to visit my parents, and the TV was messed up. My dad's had this TV for a long time, and my dad sat there and he saw there was some on sale, and he bought one. And he turned to me, and my nickname is Sam Dog. That's always been my nickname for some reason. And he was like, Sam Dog, I just bought a TV and I didn't care. Like, I have the money in my bank account to do that. Like, I just bought a really expensive 70-inch TV. And he was just sitting there in disbelief. Mind you, this is 6 years later when, we have a totally different life. We're on our feet. My dad has an amazing partner. She's wonderful. And he's still 6 years later is like, "Oh my god, like, I just bought a TV." And we were never able to do that before because we were living paycheck to paycheck, and now we know why. My mom was gambling all of our money away.
So what about you? How did your life change from that moment?
Um, well, I once we finally moved into the house, I had some normalcy. I was able to focus on school again. I was able to kind of just focus on myself. I had been focusing on my family and been in survival mode for so long that it was an adjustment trying to get back to being a normal person, I guess you could say. And it felt good to just like sit down and watch TV and do nothing. Before we were, just looking for houses, looking for this, looking for that. And a few months into it, I ended up getting a kitten, who I still have, and that was a lot of work. And she really, I always complain about her, but she literally kind of saved me because I had something to take care of and focus on that and not what was going, on in my life. And 5 months after everything happened, I met my now fiance. We started dating in August of 2020, and he has totally changed my life in ways that I can't even describe. So, all of these bad things happened within like a 5-month period. And then from there on, it's been up ever since.
So if there's somebody else out there that, and this is a common one, I mean, I see it on Reddit, I see it, in the news about parents, unfortunately, borrowing, I guess, their children's social security numbers, taking out credit in their names, all kinds of things. If you were talking to someone who went through a situation like that, who is in a situation like that, that deep betrayal by a parent, what would you say to them?
I would say you have to let it hurt in the beginning. You have to kind of process it, and you have to understand it's not your fault, that you didn't do anything wrong. Um, your parents, you're supposed to trust them. They're supposed to protect you. They're supposed to um, not betray you. Um, but you also have to feel it, but then you have to let it go. I could sit here and be angry at her all day and let that destroy me, because it can. Um, I let myself be angry. I let it hurt. And then I just was like, I have to forgive her. I'm not going to forget it, but I'm definitely going to forgive it for myself, just because holding on to that type of hatred when you're betrayed that way is really just toxic for your mental health. And you can't fully move on unless you kind of come to terms with that. It sucks in the beginning. You're going to be upset, but you can always dig yourself out of it.
Were there, besides the kitchen, were there any things that helped you kind of in that moment? Any songs or mantras or anything that you did for self-care?
Well, so my dad, grew up around boxing, and he did boxing, from like 6 to 22. So, there's this phrase, and it's pretty much everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. That was our
Oh,
life.
oh, I like that one.
Yeah, that
I
was
want
our
to play on
life
that.
for, I think Mike Tyson might have said that, but that was our life for 6 months. We used to say it all the time, because every time, and my dad's friend also told us, don't get too comfortable. You don't know what she's doing. Because every time we turn around, something else would come up, something would happen out of the blue. Um, we would find out about another thing, and he would say, don't get too comfortable. So those two kind of were what we were living by. It was, don't get too comfortable, and everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. Because when you're in survival mode like that, you have to pivot constantly. And those were two things that kind of like really helped us. Like, okay, I could sit here and I could boohoo about it, or I could pivot and move on and go in a different direction, which is kind of how I like to frame it to clients when they're going through um, creating their new beginning, right? So yes, whether you have this divorce, or, you broke up with your partner and you're figuring out custody, um, this isn't where you thought your life was gonna be, but you can pivot and create a whole new one.
Mhm.
This is just a different direction you have to go.
We say that all the time. Like, you can sit there and wallow, and look, I'm not
Mhm.
knocking wallowing. As you said, you gotta let it hurt for a minute, that's okay. But we see the clients and the differences, the ones who wallow for months versus the ones who wallow for, a short period of time and then go, "All right, I didn't pick this, but let's, rock option B,
Mhm.
and let's make the next part, the next chapter amazing." And I love that you've done that. What impact do you think this has had on your personal life, your relationship with your fiance and soon to be stepson?
I think it's made me communicate way differently. My fiance and I have no secrets, financially, anything. There's so much that we found out that my mom hid, that I tell him everything. He knows everything. There's not one thing I do not tell him. Um, and I think a lot of that just comes from seeing how like betrayed my dad felt, and they were high school sweethearts. My dad was with her from, what is it, teen to 45, they grew up together. They had me right out of high school. The three of us grew up together. When you have young parents, your relationship's different.
Mhm.
You grow up with your parents. And so I just try to be open and honest with both of them, honestly. I don't hide anything.
And what about work? I mean, I know it impacts how you talk to our clients about the pivot moment, but has it impacted your work in any other way?
Um, yeah, especially with the clients, when it comes to having some type of financial discrepancy. We see everything from, secret bank accounts, moving money around, transferring money, putting things in children's names. Unfortunately, that's really common. We see that. And for me, I'm really, really meticulous when I was a paralegal about looking through financials. I tear them apart to find things because I know how people like that think, and it helps me pick things up quicker. And that's what I look for right away.
No, I couldn't agree more. Looking through financial statements is actually one of my favorite parts about practicing family law. You can find very interesting stories in financial statements. Is there anything that you would say to somebody going through that situation? But in hindsight, is there anything you'd want to say to your former self?
I definitely would say it's going to be okay. You're going to have a life that you never thought you would have. It sucks now. Um, you might make some stupid decisions along the way and let people in your life that you probably shouldn't have. Um, but it's all going to work out.
Okay, so we like to end every episode this way. I like task every guest to finish the sentence. This is not the end, but it's the beginning of blank.
This is not the end. I think it would probably be, I'd say it's the beginning of your adventure. I feel like I didn't really start living until all this happened. And I feel like I'm kind of on this adventure.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it, and I hope it inspires other listeners.
No problem. Anytime. Thanks for having me.